On a crisp autumn afternoon, I was savoring a much-needed coffee break at the cozy little cafe across from my office building, the aroma of freshly brewed espresso mingling with the faint scent of cinnamon pastries. The hum of soft conversations and the clink of ceramic cups created a comforting backdrop as I sipped my latte. Suddenly, my phone buzzed to life on the table, shattering the moment's tranquility. My mother's name, Mom, flashed on the screen, and I nearly choked on my drink, startled by the unexpected call. It had been months since we last spoke, a silence that had become all too familiar. Our relationship had never been warm or close, marked instead by a polite distance that neither of us seemed eager to bridge. "Kelly, hello, dear." Her voice came through the line, unnaturally gentle, almost cautious, as if she were treading on fragile ground. "Hi, Mom," I replied, my tone guarded as I stirred my coffee nervously, the spoon clinking softly against the mug. "This is unexpected. I just wanted to check in, see how you're holding up after the divorce." "It must have been terribly difficult," she said, her words laced with a concern that felt foreign to me. I sighed, a familiar ache tightening in my chest. Only 2 weeks had passed since I finalized my divorce from Mark, the man I'd thought I'd spend my life with. The betrayal still burned. Finding him in our bed with his coworker had shattered my trust and left me reeling. "Yeah, it's been rough," I admitted, my voice softer than I intended. "But I'm managing. At least I got to keep the house. Mark didn't fight me on it. I think his guilt worked in my favor." "Listen, Kelly," Mom interjected before I could say more, her tone shifting slightly. "Your father and I miss you terribly. Why don't you come over for dinner this Saturday? It's been far too long since we've shared a proper family meal." The invitation caught me completely off guard, like a sudden gust of wind on a still day. In the 5 years I'd been married to Mark, my parents had invited us over perhaps twice, and those visits had been stiff, with conversations that barely scratched the surface, weather, work, and vague pleasantries. Curiosity tugged at me, overriding my hesitation. "Okay, sure," I said, my voice tinged with uncertainty. "I'll come." After hanging up, I sat there, puzzled, staring at the steam rising from my coffee. My parents had never been the warm, inviting type. Growing up, my older sister, Lisa, had always been their pride and joy, the golden child with straight A's, a picture-perfect marriage right out of college, and 2 adorable grandchildren to dote on. I, on the other hand, was just Kelly, the overlooked afterthought, always lingering in Lisa's shadow. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. I pulled into my parents' driveway, the tires crunching over the gravel as I noted their modest ranch-style home, its faded paint peeling at the edges, begging for a fresh coat. Before I could even knock, Dad flung open the door, his face breaking into a grin that felt oddly enthusiastic. "Kelly, come in," he said, pulling me into an awkward hug that caught me by surprise. Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a floral apron, her smile warm but slightly strained. "You're right on time, dear. Dinner's almost ready." The dining table was set with their good china, the delicate set reserved for rare occasions like Thanksgiving or Christmas. The sight of it sent a prickle of suspicion down my spine. Something was definitely up. As we sat down to eat, they bombarded me with questions, their curiosity almost overwhelming. "So, how's work going at the marketing firm?" Dad asked, his fork poised over his plate of roasted chicken. "It's fine," I replied, cutting into my own portion. "I'm actually up for a promotion next month, so I've been putting in extra hours." "And what do you do in your free time now?" Mom chimed in, her eyes bright with interest. "Any new hobbies?" I shrugged, feeling the weight of their attention. "Not really. I've just been focused on getting through each day. The divorce, it took a lot out of me." "Of course, dear," Mom said, reaching over to pat my hand with a sympathy that felt rehearsed. "But you're young. You'll bounce back, stronger than ever." They exchanged a quick glance, a silent signal that made my stomach twist. Dad cleared his throat, leaning forward slightly. "So, what are your plans for the house?" There it was, the real reason for this sudden family dinner. My fork paused midair as I met his gaze. I'm going to live in it, I said flatly. I'm planning to renovate next year, once I've saved up enough. Mom's eyes lit up, too eager for my liking. Renovation? How timely that you should mention that. I set my fork down, my appetite waning. What do you mean? Well, Dad began, his tone careful. Your mother and I have decided to completely renovate our house. The plumbing's outdated, and the electrical wiring isn't up to code anymore. It's a big project. That's good, I said cautiously, glancing between them. This place could use some work. The thing is, Mom continued, her voice softening as if to cushion the blow, we'll need somewhere to stay during the renovation. It could take several months. My stomach tightened as the pieces fell into place. Lisa's place is already crowded with the kids, Dad added quickly, as if anticipating my next question. And renting would be such a waste of money. Mom reached across the table, squeezing my hand with a warmth that felt more strategic than genuine. We were hoping you might let us stay at your house, Kelly. It's so spacious, and you have all that room just for yourself. The urge to say no surged through me, sharp and immediate. The thought of my parents invading my personal sanctuary, the one place where I could finally breathe after the chaos of my divorce, made my skin crawl. We'd never gotten along well, not really. Years of feeling second best to Lisa had left scars, and I'd grown to cherish my independence, hard-won after years of living in her shadow. But as I looked at their expectant faces, hope flickering in their eyes, I hesitated. Maybe, just maybe, this could be a chance to mend our fractured relationship. My house was spacious, a 4-bedroom colonial with more room than I needed for just myself. I guess that would be okay, I said slowly, the words heavy on my tongue. When would you need to move in? Next week, Mom suggested eagerly, her face lighting up. The contractors are starting on Monday. We'd be so grateful, Kelly. Dad nodded, his expression softening. It would help us tremendously. Against my better judgment, I agreed. All right, you can stay with me until your renovation is complete. Their relief was palpable, their smiles so genuine that I wondered if I'd misjudged their intentions. Perhaps they truly wanted to reconnect, and this living arrangement could be the opportunity we needed to build something better. Thank you, honey, Mom said, her eyes misting over. This means the world to us. 1 week later, my parents arrived at my doorstep, their lives neatly contained in a few suitcases. Dad hefted a box of personal belongings, photo albums, I suspected, while Mom clutched a bag brimming with her favorite cookware, the handles of pots and pans peeking out. Welcome, I said, holding the door open, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. I've prepared the guest room for you both upstairs. This is so kind of you, Kelly, Mom said, planting a quick kiss on my cheek as she brushed past me. We promise not to be a bother. As I helped settle them in, I tried to silence the nagging voice in my head whispering that I'd regret this decision. But I pushed it aside, determined to give it a chance. How bad could it be? It was only temporary after all. The first few weeks of cohabitation were surprisingly smooth, almost deceptively so. My routine kept our interactions to a minimum. I left for work each morning around 8 a.m., navigating the rush hour traffic to my office, and didn't return until after 6 p.m., when the sky was already darkening. To my surprise, Mom took to preparing dinner, a gesture that felt like a faint echo of my childhood. I'd come home to find the kitchen filled with the comforting scent of her cooking, meatloaf one night, lasagna the next. How was your day? She'd ask as I hung up my coat and kicked off my heels, her voice bright but distant, like she was reading from a script. Busy but productive, I'd reply, sinking into a chair at the kitchen table, too tired to elaborate. Dad, meanwhile, would be in the living room, engrossed in the evening news, offering a casual wave as I passed by, his attention split between the screen and me. On weekends, they'd leave early to check on the progress of their house renovation, giving me the house to myself. I cherished those hours of solitude, using them to reclaim my space, whether by binge-watching a new series or tackling the laundry that had been piling up during the week. The contractors have gutted the bathroom, Dad reported one Sunday evening as they returned, his voice tinged with frustration. They found some water damage that needs to be addressed. Sounds like it's going to take longer than planned, I said, trying to mask the concern creeping into my tone. Mom nodded, smoothing her apron. These things always do, she said with a resigned sigh. But we're so grateful to have somewhere comfortable to stay. I managed a tight smile, murmuring something about being happy to help. But beneath the surface, a quiet unease began to grow. The peaceful arrangement didn't last. The first sign of discord surfaced on a crisp Saturday morning when I was cleaning the kitchen, the strains of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony flowing through my Bluetooth speaker, keeping my spirits high as I was scrubbing the counters. Suddenly, Mom appeared in the doorway, her face pinched, her eyes squinting as if the music were a physical irritant. "Kelly, darling, would you mind turning that down, or better yet, off?" she asked, her voice tight with strain. "I've got a terrible migraine starting to brew." "Oh, sure," I said, quickly reaching for the speaker to silence it, though a flicker of irritation flared in my chest. I just always clean to classical music. It helps me focus. Mom offered a thin smile, already retreating. "I understand, dear, but quiet mornings are better for my head." I nodded, resuming my cleaning in silence, but the moment lingered, a small but sharp reminder that my home was no longer entirely my own, a surge of validation mixed with anger. "But I wanted to check with you first. I don't want to escalate this unnecessarily, but I can't let them get away with this." "Smart move," James replied, his voice calm and professional, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. "Here's what we'll do. First, I'll draft a formal demand letter to your parents, stating they must vacate your property immediately or face legal consequences. We'll serve it tomorrow morning. If they refuse to comply, we can involve the police to enforce your rights as the homeowner. You have the title, the mortgage in your name. There's no legal ground for them to stand on." I exhaled, gripping the phone tightly as I stood by the hotel room's window, staring out at the city lights blurred by my unshed tears. "Okay, that sounds good. How soon can we get this resolved?" "I'll have the letter ready by morning," James assured me. "I'll meet you at your house at 9 a.m. to deliver it in person. If they don't let you in, we'll call the police right then. In the meantime, gather any documentation you have, deed, mortgage statements, utility bills, to solidify your claim. And Kelly, try to get some rest. You're in the right here." "Rest might be a stretch," I said with a bitter laugh, rubbing my temples. "But thank you, James. I'll see you tomorrow." After hanging up, I sank onto the stiff hotel bed, the weight of the day pressing down on me. The audacity of my parents' actions replayed in my mind like a bad movie, their smug certainty that I'd just walk away from my own home, the home I'd fought tooth and nail to keep after Mark's betrayal. The house wasn't just brick and mortar, it was my sanctuary, my proof that I could rebuild my life after it had crumbled. And now, my own family was trying to take it from me, as if my needs, my hard work, meant nothing. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, my mind cycling through memories of my childhood, Lisa's achievements always celebrated, my own overlooked, my parents' dismissive shrugs when I tried to share my dreams. I'd spent years chasing their approval, bending over backward to be the good daughter, only to be met with this betrayal. By dawn, my exhaustion had hardened into resolve. I wasn't the afterthought anymore. I was done letting them walk all over me. The next morning, I arrived at my house promptly at 9 a.m., James's sleek black sedan already parked in the driveway. He stepped out, briefcase in hand, his expression a mix of determination and empathy. "Ready?" he asked, adjusting his tie. "As I'll ever be," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. My heart pounded as we approached the front door, the same door I'd walked through countless times, now a barrier to my own life. I rang the doorbell, the chime echoing inside, followed by the faint sound of footsteps. Mom's face appeared at the side window, her eyes narrowing before she opened the door, the security chain still in place, as if I were some unwelcome solicitor. "Kelly," she said coolly, her gaze flicking to James. "Who's this?" "This is James Brennan, my lawyer," I said, my tone firm. We're here to discuss your illegal occupation of my property. Mom's lips pursed, but she didn't flinch. There's no need for lawyers, Kelly. This is a family matter. James stepped forward, holding up a crisp white envelope. Mrs. Thompson, this is a formal demand letter. You and your husband are to vacate this property immediately. You have no legal right to remain here, and any attempt to do so will result in police involvement. Dad appeared behind Mom, his face flushed with indignation. This is absurd, he sputtered. You're really going to treat your own parents like criminals? Over a house. This isn't just a house, I snapped, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. It's my home. The one I've paid for, maintained, and earned. You had no right to change the locks or try to give it to Lisa. Lisa needs this place more than you do, Mom said, her voice dripping with condescension. You're alone, Kelly. You don't need all this space. Be reasonable. Reasonable? I echoed, incredulous. You've been living here rent-free, turning my home into a daycare, dictating how I live, and now you've locked me out. That's not family support. That's entitlement. James cleared his throat, cutting through the tension. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, you have until noon to open the door and allow Ms. Thompson access to her property. If you refuse, we'll contact the authorities. I suggest you comply. Mom's eyes widened, a flicker of uncertainty breaking through her composure. You wouldn't call the police on us, she said, but her voice wavered, lacking the conviction of the night before. Try me, I said, meeting her gaze. I'm done being pushed around. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Dad muttered something under his breath and disappeared into the house. Mom hesitated, her hand lingering on the doorframe, before she unhooked the chain and swung the door open. Fine, she said tightly. Come in. But this isn't over. I stepped inside, the familiar scent of my home, lavender from the diffuser I kept in the hall, washing over me, though it felt tainted by the tension. James followed, his presence a reassuring anchor. My parents' suitcases were already half-packed in the living room, a sign they'd anticipated some resistance, but hadn't expected me to act so swiftly. We'll need to discuss a timeline for your departure, James said, setting his briefcase on the coffee table. And I'll be documenting the condition of the property to ensure no further unauthorized changes have been made. Dad glared at him, but Mom just sighed, sinking into an armchair. We didn't mean for it to come to this, she said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. We just wanted to help Lisa. She's struggling, Kelly. Then help her with your own resources, I said, my voice steady but cold. Not by stealing mine. The next hour was a blur of negotiations, with James mediating as my parents reluctantly agreed to move out by the end of the day. They called Lisa, who arrived with Tom and the kids, her face a mask of resentment as she loaded their belongings into their minivan. Mia and Jake, oblivious to the drama, waved at me cheerfully as they left, and I managed a weak smile, my heart aching for their innocence. By evening, the house was mine again, though the silence felt heavier than before. I walked through each room, checking for damage, finding only minor traces of their stay, scratches on the hardwood from the kids' toys, a few smudges on the walls. The guest rooms smelled faintly of Mom's perfume, a lingering reminder of the chaos they'd brought. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, the same spot where Jen and I had laughed just weeks ago, before everything unraveled. My phone buzzed with a text from James, confirming he'd follow up with a restraining order if needed. I thanked him, then set the phone down, staring at the walls of my home. The weeks that followed were quiet, almost eerily so. My parents didn't call, and Lisa's silence was deafening. I heard through a mutual friend that they'd moved into a rental while their renovation dragged on, but I didn't reach out. The betrayal had severed something I wasn't sure could be repaired. At work, I threw myself into my projects, earning the promotion I'd been gunning for, a small victory that felt monumental after everything. Jen came over one evening, bringing takeout and her signature sarcasm. So, you survived the family invasion, she said, raising her glass. You're tougher than I thought. I laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in months. "Barely," I said. "But I learned something. I don't need their approval to know my worth." "Damn right," Jen said, clinking her glass against mine. "This house is yours, Kelly. And so is your life." As we talked into the night, the weight of the past weeks began to lift. My home felt like mine again, not just a building but a space where I could breathe, grow, and reclaim my peace. The scars of my family's betrayal would linger, but they no longer defined me. I was Kelly, not the afterthought, not the pushover, but the woman who'd fought for her place in the world and won a flicker of relief that was quickly overshadowed by the weight of what I was about to do. Never in my wildest dreams had I imagined I'd be standing in a police station, confronting my own parents over something as fundamental as my right to my home. But they had crossed a line so brazenly, with such calculated entitlement, that I had no choice but to stand my ground. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and dialed the non-emergency police line from the hotel room. At the station, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a stark glow over the worn linoleum floor. The night shift officer, a middle-aged man with a tired but kind demeanor, looked up from his desk as I approached. "I need to report an illegal seizure of property," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "My parents have changed the locks to my house and are refusing to let me in." The officer nodded, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I'll need to see some identification and proof of ownership," he said, his tone professional but not unkind. I handed over my driver's license and pulled up digital copies of my deed and mortgage documents on my phone, the screen glowing with the evidence of my claim. As I recounted the situation, how I'd allowed my parents to stay temporarily during their home renovation, only for them to lock me out and attempt to give my house to my sister, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sorrow. The officer listened patiently, jotting notes, his pen scratching softly against the paper. After taking my official statement, he assured me they'd send officers to my address to address the issue. "We'll need to contact you for updates," he said. "Where are you staying tonight?" "I'll be at the Hampton Inn on 5th Street, I replied, handing over my contact information. "Please keep me posted." Back at the hotel, I tried to relax, sinking into the stiff armchair by the window, but my mind was a whirlwind of anger and disbelief. The audacity of my parents' actions, their smug certainty that they could simply take what was mine, kept me awake, replaying the betrayal in vivid detail. Around midnight, the hotel phone jolted me from my thoughts. "Ms. Richards, this is Officer Daniels from the police department," a calm voice said. "I'm calling about your house situation." I sat up, my heart racing. "Yes, what happened?" "We were forced to detain your parents, ma'am," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "They resisted our officers and used insulting language when we explained they were illegally occupying your property. They're currently in holding at the station." My stomach dropped, a pang of guilt piercing through my resolve despite everything. My parents, in jail? The image of them in holding cells felt surreal, like a scene from someone else's life. "When can I come to the station?" I asked, glancing at the clock, its red digits glowing 12:15 a.m. "First thing in the morning would be best," Officer Daniels replied. "We'll keep you updated." After hanging up, my cell phone lit up with a barrage of missed calls and messages from my parents and Lisa, their names flashing relentlessly on the screen. I scrolled through a few. "How could you do this to your own parents?" "We raised you," from Mom. "Mom's crying in a cell because of you." "You're heartless," from Lisa. "Withdraw your statement now." "Family helps family," from Dad. The words stung, each one a calculated jab meant to guilt me into submission. I turned off my phone, the silence a small act of defiance. I needed space to think, to hold fast to my decision without their manipulation clouding my judgment. Sleep was impossible, the hotel room's sterile quiet amplifying my racing thoughts. I paced the carpet, the events of the day looping in my mind, Mom's condescending smile, Dad's dismissive tone, Lisa's entitled glare. By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. I turned my phone back on, the screen flooding with more notifications, dozens of missed calls, voicemails, and texts, each one more accusatory than the last. "You're no longer my sister," Lisa had written, her words sharp but oddly liberating. I deleted the messages without responding, refusing to let their tactics pull me back into their orbit. At the police station, the air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and disinfectant. My parents sat in a small holding area, looking disheveled and worn. Mom's eyes were red and puffy, her face crumpled as she sobbed quietly. Dad's expression was a mix of anger and defeat, his shoulders slumped under the weight of the night. When Mom saw me, her crying intensified, a theatrical display that might have swayed me in the past. But not now. I remembered their plan to hand my house to Lisa, their utter disregard for my rights, and my pity hardened into resolve. I'm ready to withdraw my statement on one condition, I told the officer, my voice clear as I locked eyes with my parents. They need to take their things and move out of my house immediately today. Yes, fine, Dad said quickly, his desperation palpable, replacing the defiance he'd shown the night before. Whatever you want, Kelly. Mom nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face. We'll go right now. Just please drop the charges. The officer explained they'd face a fine for resisting and insulting the police, but they could be released if I agreed not to press charges. I nodded, my jaw tight. I just want them out. In the station's parking lot, Lisa was waiting, pacing beside her minivan, her face a storm of anxiety and anger. When she saw our parents emerge, she rushed forward, wrapping Mom in a hug and helping Dad with their coats. She turned to me, her eyes blazing with hatred, but said nothing. They climbed into her car and drove off toward my house, Lisa's glare lingering in my rearview mirror as I followed in my own vehicle to ensure they followed through. At the house, my parents worked with uncharacteristic speed, packing their belongings in silence. Suitcases were zipped shut, boxes taped up, and their car loaded in the garage. The air was heavy with unspoken resentment, but I stood by the front door, arms crossed, watching as they dismantled their temporary claim on my space. Within an hour, they were done. They drove away without a word, without even a glance in my direction, the crunch of gravel under their tires the only sound as they left. I closed the door behind them, the click of the lock a small but significant victory. I immediately called a locksmith, the urgency in my voice clear as I arranged for all the locks to be changed by the end of the day. As the technician worked, drilling and installing new deadbolts, I made a silent vow no one from my family would ever set foot in my home again. The house felt different now, quieter, but not empty. It was mine again, every corner reclaimed from the chaos they'd brought. A few days later, my phone pinged with a text from Mom. I no longer consider you a member of this family. We do not want to communicate with you anymore. I stared at the words, expecting pain, but instead, a wave of relief washed over me. Freedom. I didn't want to communicate with them either. Not with their endless demands, their blatant favoritism toward Lisa, their belief that my life was theirs to control. I deleted the message without replying, a final act of severance. Now, I live quietly in my house, alone but not lonely. The rooms are filled with my choices, my books on the shelves, my music on the speakers, my rhythm to each day. I've redecorated the guest room, erasing the faint traces of Mom's perfume with a fresh coat of paint and new linens. Work has become a refuge, my promotion a testament to my resilience. Jen visits often, her laughter filling the space where tension once lingered, and we toast to my newfound peace. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I should feel guilty for how things ended. But then I remember, I didn't create this situation. I didn't invite their betrayal or their entitlement. I simply refused to be manipulated, to let them take what I'd worked so hard to build. My home is truly mine again, a sanctuary where I can breathe, dream, and live on my terms. For the first time in years, I am completely at peace, and that is worth more than any approval they could ever offer. Please feel free to comment below if you liked this. Remember to like and subscribe for more.